Thanks, guys. Oh, it's great. It's great to be with you. Great to be with you. Let me read you a couple of verses from the Bible, from Hebrews 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. I had an amazing experience some years ago. I was in Mozambique. I was out there with one of the big aid organizations. And I was in a hut with a woman who was dying of AIDS. As I left the hut, and she had no possessions, she had no money, nothing, her daughter of 12 years old tugged my coat. And she said, "Sir, would you give me some money?" I've been asked that question all over the world by kids, street kids in Brazil, little umbrella girls in Thailand. And I said, "Dodie, why do you want money?" She said, "Sir, I want shoes of the same color to go to school." And I looked down and she's got a red shoe on and a green shoe on. It's not a great dream, is it, when you're on the cusp of your teenage years to want shoes of the same color to go to school? And then I leave there and I go to America. I'm flown into America and I'm being driven down the highway near Dallas, and the cell phone goes in the car. Now, before I tell you the rest of this story, let me assure you I have no political affiliations whatsoever, but I get invited to the White House. So 1 minute, I'm in this little hut in Mozambique. Next, I'm sat outside the Oval Office. President turns up briefly, and they're discussing the events of September 11, when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I found it fascinating listening to the doctors, the nurses, the soldiers, but most interesting of all, the firefighters. I'd earlier heard one man speak. He said, "I'm the captain of my team, I'm 50 years old, I'm pretty fit, but I'm running up the stairs and we got a lot of oxygen and equipment on our back, and I realize we're never going to make it." And I say to the team, "We're going to have to use the elevator." It was extremely dangerous. The building was already buckling. And the team agreed, and we go into the elevator and we press the button and we begin to move up the building, but we don't know if we're going to get out of this thing. We get halfway up to a mezzanine level and the lift stops. I press a button, the door opens, so at least we're out. And he said, "I remember thinking how orderly people are coming down the stairs. And then I go into a room and it's filled with black smoke. And I'm helping people find the exit. This way, sir, this way, madam." And then I come upon a man sat at a computer screen. He's trying to finish a financial deal. Maybe if he hits that last key, he will make hundreds of thousands of dollars commission. And I scream at him that he must leave the room now. And he waves me back and goes back hitting the keys. And I scream at him again, and this time he doesn't even bother to turn around. And I say to my team, "Ask him one more time. And if he won't go, throw him down the stairs." Was that man successful? Well, in many ways he was. He earned an incredible salary. His kids were in the best school in Manhattan. He drove an incredible motor car. But the only thing that allowed him to go on feeling successful on that fateful day was an unbelievable lack of perspective. About 100 feet of perspective. In fact, Dodie had more perspective than him. She had more perspective choosing her shoes of the same color to go to school. He had no idea that in the next 12 or 15 seconds, his life would be taken from him. I've often thought about that man. And guys, that perspective is hard to get in busy life today. Just to stand back. It's why these moments are so precious. Look, we're a mixed audience here today. Many of you will be men of faith. You followed Jesus for many years. Some of you are quite not sure what you believe. Some of you have been dragged here by one of your mates. If you went outside, we'd see your heel marks where you bravely fought the last 50 meters. Some of you in great marriages, some of your marriages going through tough times, some of your kids doing well, some of your kids breaking your heart, some single, some married, some wealthy, some not doing so well financially. All kinds of men gathered together for this brief moment to get a little perspective. A friend of mine's professor of psychology at Oxford. He said to me a couple of years ago, he said, "Rob, most people believe a future event will make them happy. If I could win the lottery, if I could get married, if I could move house, if I could pass that exam, if I could get that job." He said, "Rob, really happy people grasp it now. Because now is all we've got. You and I in this room together, we will never do this in the same way ever again. This is our now to grasp this brief moment." I love being on the road with Gerrit. Gerrit's a South African. Gerrit played first-class rugby in South Africa and Wales. In fact, the other day we were driving down the motorway together and we began to have one of those arguments. If you could put together the best Welsh team ever in the last 25 years, or best South African team, and we put together what we felt was the best South African team in 25 years, and then we went online to see what the pundits thought. We got it pretty close, but Gerrit had played with 6 or 7 of those guys. He was a fitness coach to Cardiff Rugby Club. He came to Cardiff about 20-odd years ago on a rugby trip. Saw a pretty girl across the street and married her. Not that day, a little later, a little later. And then when he was 40, he decided he wanted to try to qualify as a paratrooper, which is one of the most difficult assessment courses in the world. He'll tell you a bit about that. Full-time with Care of the Family on the speaking team. Gerrit and I speak a lot together, and I think you're going to love listening to him now. So would you welcome Gerrit as he comes to speak?
About 10 or 12 years ago, I was in the valley. I was going through a really difficult time in life, and I visited South Africa, and a friend said, "Come on, we're going to a men's event." Angus Buchan is an evangelist in South Africa. 60,000 men under one tent. Biggest tent in the world. Took them 2 weeks to erect this tent. 60,000 men standing together, raising their hands, singing praises to the Lord. It's one of my favorite moments of all time. This morning as you were singing, I turned to Rob and I said, "Rob, this is what I love." And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm telling you now. As I stood there, I could feel my neck hair stand erect. I could feel goosebumps. You guys singing praises to the Lord. Oh boy, it's beautiful. You know, the Lord says He loves it when we get together as men. That is where the Lord commands a blessing. It is a privilege to be here with you this morning. I can honestly say I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. This first section, I'd just like to share a little bit with you about life in the arena. Some years ago, I was really struggling to motivate myself to exercise regularly. I was going to the gym, but I was finding it hard going. Then I came across this little quote in my study Bible that said, "Without a goal, discipline is nothing but self-punishment." And I thought, wow, that's it. There I am, and in the gym, I'm training away, but I'm struggling to motivate myself. I need a goal. I'd stopped playing rugby. I'd already done the half Ironman triathlon. That didn't appeal to me anymore. I needed a goal. So a friend from our men's group in church said, "Why don't you look at the paratroopers? There's a reserve unit just in Cardiff where I live." And at first I was very excited, but that excitement quite quickly turned to a little bit of despair. Because before the parachute unit regiment will even look at you, you need to be able to run 1.5 miles in less than 9 minutes. I was coming up to the age of 40, I didn't know if I could still do that. I was about to pack it in when I came across some words by Theodore Roosevelt some years ago. And he said something like this: "The credit belongs to the man in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly and who at best in the end knows the triumph of great achievement. But at worst, if he should fail, at least he fails whilst daring greatly, so that his place would never be with those cold and timid souls that have never known neither victory nor defeat." Oh man, I was pumped. Victory or defeat, if I succeed or fail, at least I was going to give this thing a go. Now, to wear the maroon beret of the parachute regiment with pride, you need to pass P Company. P Company is short for Pegasus Company. This is the selection that the British Army put you through for a parachute, for a paratrooper. P Company is 7 events in 3 days. The first event is the 10-mile TAB. TAB is short for Tactical Advance to Battle. So you have 10 miles and you have that you need to cover with your full backpack, 35 pounds. You have your rifle in a unit, and you have 1 hour, 50 minutes to cover it with all of that weight. But you have to keep up with the unit. If you can't work at their pace, you are binned. You're pulled off the event. Second event on day 1 is the Trainasium. This is an aerial assault course built 20 to 55 feet above the ground. This is to test your ability to overcome your fear, but also to obey a command whilst under duress. And we were really tested on this one. At first, it just looks like a giant playground, scaffolds and planks and ladders and ropes, any schoolboy's dream. But we were tested on this one. Because one of the obstacles you have to overcome is you run along a gangplank, keeping in mind that you start at least 20 feet above the ground. You run along this narrow gangplank, and then when you get to the end, you have to jump a huge gap onto a cargo net that hangs opposite. But the instructions are very, very clear. As you approach the cargo net through the air, punch your arm through one of the big holes so that you can hook on with your elbow, with your arm. And then you have a good grip. Because if you try and grab the ropes with your hand and you miss your grip, you're going to fall. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to a young lad from our detachment in Cardiff, young Scott Isles. Jumped, tried to grab on, missed his grip, fell backwards, got his left leg entangled in the cargo net. Snapped both the bones of his lower leg clean through. Guys, I tell you, young Scott was hanging upside down, his legs sticking out at this funny angle, screaming his head off while the medics were trying to cut him off this cargo net. And the rest of us were just brought into this small square in full view of this thing playing off in front of us. Off in the ambulance, out of there, and then we were just told to get on with it. First event on day 2, 3 events on day 2. The first one is the log race. Teams of 8 men carry a log. It weighs about 130 pounds. Carry it for 2 miles, undulating terrain, to simulate the resupply of ammunition to the front line. Then just before lunch, you have the steeplechase event. This is an individual event where you have to overcome several water obstacles and an assault course through the woods. And it's 1.8 miles. You have 20 minutes to get through that. And then the last event on day 2 is milling. 2 men face each other in a very small square with boxing gloves. Only straight punches to the head and face are allowed. No body shots, no uppercuts, no hooks, and definitely you're not allowed to block or try and defend yourself. They want to test your aggression. So pretty much what you do here is for 1 minute, you try and punch the other guy in his face as hard and as many times as you can. But he's doing the same thing to you. So if you're still around on day 3, you kick off the last day with the 2-mile run. 2-mile run, so this time you have your backpack with all your weight and your rifle, and you have 18 minutes to cover the 2 miles with your 35 pounds on your back. And the final event is the stretcher race. Teams of about a dozen men carry a tank track. Tank track has been welded to a steel frame. Instructors call this a stretcher. You carry that above your shoulders for 5 miles, again, very difficult terrain. And you alternate within the team. This is to simulate the extraction of a casualty from the battlefield. Now guys, just to give you an idea of how tough P Company is. Between 2001 and 2010, when I attempted P Company, from my unit, 144 Paramed Squadron, Cardiff, only 2 men managed to pass in 10 years. A couple of weeks before I took on P Company, 144 Paramed has units all throughout the country, all throughout the UK. Any man could put his name down to attempt P Company. So we had a little trial weekend 2 weekends before. 16 men applied to do P Company. Of the 16, only 5 were selected to go and take on P Company. Of the 5, only 3 passed. P Company is pretty tough. Now, I've served in 2 armies. We had national service in South Africa when I grew up, and I served in the British Army, and I want to tell you, I like the British Army. British Army food is good. In South Africa, we used to queue for hours, man. And it's single file. You're not allowed to speak to anyone. You stand there and literally sometimes for more than an hour. You get to the front of the queue and they give you this tin pan. It's, like in the prison movies when they have those tin trays with the little compartments. It's something like that. And then you get to the front and then they plonk on whatever they cooked for the day. And I can remember one of the very first times I sat down. I said, Grace, you sit in these long tables in the mess hall, and guys opposite you, guys next to you, and I sat down and I said grace, and when I opened my eyes, my portion of meat was gone. One of the very first things I learned in the South African army is you pray with one eye open, pal. British army is different. You walk into this mess hall, oh man, you have a selection of foods. It's like a buffet. You can eat as much or as little as you like. British army is awesome. Even in P Company, they have a lorry that follows the squad on all of these events. And if at any time, if you get too tired or you've had enough or pain gets too much or you want to stop, that's fine. You could just get in the back of the lorry. That lorry will even take you back to the barracks, for goodness sake. Didn't have that in the South African army. But I'll tell you what. The moment you get in the back of that lorry, it's over for you. I've done some interesting things, as Rob said. It's been my privilege to have played rugby with some pretty good players in my life. Served in 2 armies, jumped out of aeroplanes. I once even dared tell my wife she didn't need another pair of shoes. Said grace with one eye open for a while after that one as well, I'll tell you what. But I tell you that nothing that I've ever done physically compares to that log race. That was 20 minutes of the most brutal physical activity I've ever participated in. You know, right from the start, it feels like your lungs are on fire. It feels like someone is beating you, that your heart is beating so fast, it's like someone's thumping you on the breastbone with a 5-pound hammer. You have a rope looped around your arm, which is attached to the log. And as you run along, if this arm gets tired, you can't swap out with the guy on the other end. You have to keep going. At one point, it felt like my shoulder, my arm's going to be wrenched out of its socket. Just in front of you, you notice a steep incline with a ditch of water. And you know from experience, the moment you go through that ditch, your boots are going to fill up with water. Man, they feel like lead weights. Legs are burning, knees are buckling, and then you get a command to stand by for a sprint. Already feels like I can't go any faster. And then you hear that dreaded command. Go, 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 go! Now you have a choice. You can let go, you can step back, get back in the back of that lorry, and the pain will be over, even if it's just for a little while. Or you can dig deeper than ever before. Push yourself harder, try harder, cry, scream, pray, whatever it takes. But you get to that finish line. Now guys, I sometimes still look back on that and I wonder how on earth I managed. I was 40 years old. There were guys there much younger than half my age. Fitter than me, stronger than me, faster than me. But I learned an incredible lesson that day. I know the log run isn't for everyone. Why would you want to run 2 miles with a log? But I learned on that day that we are tougher than we think. We are capable of so much more than we think we can handle. And that's not just with a 2-mile run. That is in every area of our lives. That said, I also want to say this. Since working for Care for the Family, I've seen heartache and pain. We see enough of that stuff in a week to last a lifetime. We know it's not always possible to save our children from harm. It's not always possible to protect our kids or save every marriage. We know it's not always possible to keep a relationship, desirable to keep every relationship together. But I've come across men that will make that, with bravery in their lives, that would make that log run look like a vicar's tea party. A father who stood by his daughter's side even though she was breaking his heart. A husband who hung on in there when his marriage looked like it's going to break up. Men who put bread on the table when the going got tough. Do you know what? I met a young man at a seminar, and he has a sperm count of 0. He and his wife cannot have the desire of their heart. Yet he stands up in front of other men, as vulnerable as a man can be, and shares his story just to encourage them. Spoke at a breakfast meeting in Reading some time ago, and in the break a guy comes up to me and tells me about his son. Went on holiday to South America. Brutally murdered. As he's telling me his story, he's crying, I'm crying. He says some mornings on his way to work, he just feels like stepping out in front of the approaching train. Now, I've already said that we can't always save our children. We can't always save every marriage. I understand that. But these guys had a choice. They could have given up. They could have gotten the back of the lorry, but they didn't. They decided to stick it out and to see it through. And that is true bravery. These guys have blood and sweat and dust and sometimes even a few tears on their faces. They are in the arena. We are tougher than we think. We can do so much more than we can ever ask for or imagine. Guys, how can I say that with so much certainty? Because first of all, we're not alone in the fight. You see, one of the biggest mistakes we as men make is we think that we should take on life and its challenges by ourselves. That's what the enemy wants, because in the army there's this divide and conquer. If we know that a man, if you can isolate a unit from a platoon, that unit becomes vulnerable. Isolate the man from the unit, that man becomes vulnerable. And in life it works the same way. How many of you remember the old movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe? Now the first time, you remember the scene where he's thrust into the arena for the first time with a bunch of other gladiators. And they stood there and they're staring across the dusty floor of this amphitheater at these huge wooden gates opposite. They have no idea what's about to come through those gates. But Maximus Meridius, he turns to the others and he says to them, whatever comes through those gates, if we stand together, we survive. He knew that if the emperor's army comes through those gates and they get isolated, they'll get picked off one by one. But if they stand together, they have a chance. This is biblical, guys. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, 2 is better than 1. Because if one stumbles, the other can help him up. And 3 is even better than 2. That is why what we are doing here today is so incredibly powerful. That is why when men meet together in a men's group, it's powerful. You're doing life together. That's why when men meet together in an accountability relationship, it's powerful. Study done with 200 pastors in America who had all gone off on an affair with a female in their congregations. 3 things kept cropping up on every single occasion. Number 1, these guys started counseling women behind closed doors. Number 2, they stopped having quiet time with the Lord. And number 3, they no longer had someone to be accountable to. Spending time, we talk about shoulder-to-shoulder relationships, men standing together shoulder to shoulder. Whether it's a discipleship group, whether it's a one-on-one accountability thing, whether it's a small accountability group, whether it's a men's ministry getting together, men working together, doing life together is powerful. And because of that, we are tougher than we think. But far greater than that, we are tougher than we think because the creator of all things is with us. You know, it said of the greatest warrior king of all time, King David, and David became stronger and stronger. Why? Because the Lord God was with him. We're tougher than we think because we have God with us in our lives. Does that mean that everything's going to go okay for us and we're never going to be challenged by anything? No. There are no guarantees. My boy is grown now. He's traveling. He's in Australia at the moment. But he was 4 years old when I met Rebecca. I met Becky on a rugby tour. She was a prop forward. I used to joke and say she was a hooker, but I walked around with one shut eye for a while after that one as well. But when I met Becky, Joey was 4 years old. I raised that boy. I can honestly say, guys, I'm so grateful to the grace of God. And it wasn't easy, but I love that boy with all my... I don't think I could love him anymore if it was my own blood. But a few years ago, Becky came to me. She said she's pregnant, and I was very excited. This was an answer to prayer. And then one evening, it must have been 1 o'clock in the morning, she wakes me up and she's writhing in pain, clutching her groin, and she's crying. And I pick my wife up and I carry her downstairs and I get her in the car and we rush off to hospital, and they operate immediately to save her life because she had an ectopic pregnancy. So the little one was growing in the fallopian tube instead of in the womb, and he'd grown so much that the tube had burst and she was bleeding to death. NHS were awesome. They saved her life, but we lost the little one, and with that, the fallopian tube. A year or so later, she came to me again and said she's pregnant. And wow, we were excited, but right from the start, she said, something's wrong. I could just feel it. Went back to the doctors, diagnosed a second fallopian tube, second operation. Means Beck and I can't have any more kids. And we wanted more. Wanted more brothers and sisters for Joey. And we were desperately disappointed. And there were times when I would just cry out to God and say, Lord, why? Do you really know me? Do you really care for me? Do you really love me? But the answer is, of course He knows us. The Word says He knows us better than ourselves. Every hair on our body He knows. He cares for us. The psalmist says He catches our tears in a bottle. He loves us so much He sent His own Son so that we can have a relationship with Him for forever and ever. Those weren't the questions I should be asking. Rather, would I in these tough times still love Him, stand by Him, depend on Him, trust Him? It's only in these days when you can say with the old poet Habakkuk, even though the fig trees have no fruit and no grapes grow on the vine, even though the olive crops fail and the fields produce no corn, the cattle stalls are empty and all the sheep die, I will still rejoice and be glad because the Lord God is my Savior. Guys, we are tougher than we think because God is on our side. David said, He strengthens my hand for battle, my fingers for war. He's my foundation. He's my fortress. And if we believe that and we stand together as men, gosh, we can do stuff that we can't even imagine or dream of. We're tougher than we think. Robert's going to come up now and he's going to start sharing with us a little bit about some of the stuff that can come through the gate for us.
I remember standing in the Colosseum and looking at those gates. And when you looked at them all those years ago, you had no idea what was going to come through them. Men with tridents, wild animals brought in from Africa, men on horses with nets. You had no idea what was going to come through those gates. And as men, all kinds of things will come through the gates at us in our lives. And briefly, I want to share a couple of them with you. Some of you will think, well, that's not come through my gate. Well, put it in the back pocket for tomorrow. Number one, sheer time pressure. Brian Dyson was the CEO of Coca-Cola Enterprises, and Dyson said this. He said, when we're young, we juggle 5 balls. Work, family, home, friends. Work, family, home, friends, health, and what he called spirit. And he said, when we're young, we treat those as though they're all made of the same material. We juggle them without any real care. But he said, as you get older, you realize some of those balls are not made of rubber. You drop some of them, they bounce back, but others don't bounce too well. They're made of glass. It'd be better to spend a little effort over those. And family's one of them. I've made some bad mistakes in the area of time. I wrote about it many years ago in a book called The 60-Minute Father. I remember in those days I was involved as senior partner in a big law practice. I'd get home at night. My wife had long since given up trying to talk to me. But 2 small children hadn't. We'd be around that table at night and little boy would say, Daddy, I'm in the football team. Little girl would say, Susan pulled my hair. But I'd be on another planet, comatose. I'd made 50 phone calls that day, another 10 to make that evening. And I'd sit in that comatose state until the telephone rang. And a little boy would say, Daddy, it's for you. And suddenly I'd come alive. And I'd be dispensing my wisdom, my counsel, my strategy. And a little boy, a little girl would be watching me. And they weren't stamping or kicking. Be better for me if they had been. But the message they were getting loud and clear was, this matters to him. This brings him alive. And I remember the one day Diane said to me, darling, I'm not sure we're going to make it. And suddenly the things that I valued most were slipping through my fingers. 3 things kept me in that lifestyle longer than they should have. Number 1, I wanted my kids to have more than I had. We were from a very, very poor home. We didn't have an inside toilet. We didn't have running hot water. We didn't have a bathroom. We didn't even have toilet paper, for goodness sake. Even now, I can't look at a copy of the South Wales Echo without a million memories coming flooding back. I wanted my kids to have more than I had. But one psychologist put it well. We are so busy sometimes trying to give our kids what we didn't have. We don't have time to give them what we did have. Now, I know some of you won't be married. You won't have kids of your own. But you have people that matter to you. Interpret this for them. Secondly, I used to say to myself, a slower day is coming. Life won't always be so busy. Guys, even if Harriet and I are the worst speakers you've ever heard in your life, even if when you are old you tell your children's children how awful this hour was, at least take this away. A slower day is not coming. If you have anything that matters to you, you want to learn Spanish, start it today. You want to do something else, begin it today. Don't wait till you got time. A slower day is not coming. I fooled myself with it. And thirdly, I used to say, you know what, there'll always be time with the kids. I forgot how fast the door of childhood closes. Now look, if your kids like mine are grown, don't go on a great guilt trip. But if you have little ones, let me say this to you. They will be grown and gone before you know it. I remember I'd be reading Katie a bedtime story. She's grown with kids of her own now. She'd be about 4 years old. And the phone would ring downstairs. I only had a phone downstairs then. And she said, Daddy, don't take it. Kate, I'll be back in a moment. I'd take those stairs 3 at a time. I'd make that call, then it would ring again, another call. And after half an hour, I'd remember I'd not finished a bedtime story. And I'd rush back upstairs. And the light would still be on. And the book would be at the page we left it on the pillow by her head. But little eyes had fought to stay awake as long as they possibly could. And guys, I tell you what I don't understand about this. And I'm not saying this to impress you. You're a hard audience to impress. But I've had an interest in life. I've been a senior partner of a 10-office law practice. I've been involved in murder trials and deals. I've lectured all over the world to more blue-chip companies you can shake a stick at, sometimes governments. I think I've written 25 books. All those things have involved me having thousands of business calls. Almost every one has been described as urgent. I'll get some today. You know something? I can't remember one. Not one. That couldn't have waited 10 minutes while I finished a bedtime story. But at the time it seemed so very important, and I can't quite remember why. Time pressure affects others. Do you know, when they analysed the phone calls made on September 11, after the towers had crumbled, when they asked people to try and remember what loved ones had said, sometimes before they jumped to miss the flames, when they listened to messages left on answer phones, when they reread emails hurriedly sent, when they asked people to try to recall what loved ones had said from the other doomed planes, the same 3 words came up time and time again. Those words did not discuss 10-year strategies or bonuses or share prices or size of car driven or second home in the car. No. Lovers said them to lovers, wives to husbands, husbands to wives, friends to friends, kids to parents, parents to kids. I love you. Jack, I love you. Susie, I know we haven't got on too well, but it's your dad, and I want you to know I love you in spite of it all. I love you. Because when it comes down to it, nothing matters like relationships. But in the busyness of life, we sometimes forget that. And I spend a lot of my life talking to men, they're my age and perhaps a little bit younger. And they've achieved all they wanted, but they look around and say, where did my life go? Time pressure. As it affects others. And as it affects ourselves. You know, psychologists talk about type A people. Type B people love queuing. Let me give you some characteristics of type A people. Type A people have an incredible sense of the brevity of life. They talk to themselves like this. I'm 40 years old. In another 30 years, I'm going to be 70. It's already September. It's getting on 10 o'clock. Where is life going? Will there be time to do all I want to do? So they do everything quickly. Now, as I describe a typical type A character, see if any of this resonates with you. Type A do everything quickly. They walk quickly, they talk quickly, they drive quickly. Even on a holiday. They hate stopping for petrol. They would rather run out, and frequently do. Why do they hate it so much? Because when they pull into the motorway service station, they look out over the road and see all the cars and lorries they had overtaken going by. They swap lanes in traffic jams, even though they know there is an eternal law that the lane you have just joined will now move more slowly than the lane you have just left. That don't bother type A. They start talking to themselves. When I was in that lane, I was behind the big white bus. Now I'm getting nearer the big white bus. Now the big white bus is in front of me. They'll play that little game all day long. They are numbers-dominated people. The first thing they do in a car at the beginning of a long journey is hit the mileometer. They don't do anything with that number at the end of the journey. They just like to know how far they've been. And as they're driving, they're working out complicated mathematical sums. Manchester is 90 miles. If I drive at 90 mile an hour, it'll take me an hour. If I drive 180, it'll take me half an hour. If I drive at 70, no, that's too difficult. They're split-second people. They can travel hundreds of miles and get there within moments of the deadline. They're hardly ever late. They live their lives like that. And I've lived my life like that. Somebody said to me years ago, Rob, you are running so many agendas. You seem to have lost the trick of even spending time with yourself. They suggested I go for a walk in a park once a day for 10 minutes and just kick the leaves. There weren't mobile phones around then, but they'd have said, don't take your phone with you. Don't try and think of a new book idea. Just kick the leaves. It was almost an incredible moment. Guys, some of us are addicted to our phones. Dan says to me when we're watching television together, what are you doing on that phone? I say, look, I'm watching. No, I want you with me as we're watching. We have a problem with our kids with mobile phones. But I'm telling you, in our experience in care of the family, we have a much bigger problem with our parents. And the kids are seeing mum, dad always on that thing. We're not having time for... We are the first generation of Homo sapiens in the history of the universe, of whom it can truly be said, there is nowhere to hide. They'll find you somewhere. They'll find you, they'll send you an email when you're on a holiday. Your phone will ring at 1 o'clock in the morning. There's nowhere to hide. But you and I were not meant to live like that. You have to find a little peace for yourself. And thirdly, time pressures affects God. Do you know, I went through a time in my Christian life where I was busy. I was preaching sermons. I was writing books. The only thing was I'd stop praying. I'm not the greatest prayer, guys. I'm not. I don't find it easy to pray. But almost every morning, you'll find me on my knees in my study for a minute or two, perhaps a little longer. And I'll tell you why I do that. Because the smartest man who ever lived prayed. The disciples woke up one morning in Peter's mother's house, and the mat next to them is empty. They find him in the hills praying. The smartest man who ever lived got on his knees. And I'll tell you how I rediscovered it. I rediscovered the simplicity of prayer. Jesus said, if you want to pray, do this. Go into a room and close the door. The modern equivalent is turn your mobile phone off. Don't take emails while you're praying. Just close the door. Turn the thing off for a moment. And then don't worry about lots of words. Don't worry about whether you pray for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. Don't worry about that. Just your Heavenly Father knows. Begin like this. Our Father. And I began to pray again that simple prayer. That prayer begins with the three things that God wants from us. Allegiance. Your kingdom come. Honor. Hallowed be your name. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Obedience, your will be done. Three things that God wants from us. And it goes on with the three things that we need from God. Food, give us today our daily bread. Forgive us for our sin. Freedom, deliver us from evil. The whole of life is there. And I began simply to kneel and to pray that simple prayer. Guys, I don't know you from Adam. None of you, certainly none of you well, but some of you don't pray anymore, like me. Could you begin again like that? A few moments. Some of you involved in perhaps leadership, even in the church, I don't know, but you don't pray much. On your knees, beginning to take time for God. The second thing that's coming through the gates, and then we're going to have a little break very briefly, is sexual pressure. You know, in the 30 years of care for the family, I've seen lots of things destroy families. But I'll tell you this, there's nothing close to the affair that so surgically and with such skill, and often for so little, rips families in half. I've already said I know none of you, but in this room will be a man in the middle of an affair. I've been doing this long enough to know that's true. And certainly some on the edge of an affair. Let me take you back many thousands of years. It was spring. The Bible puts it like this: at the time when kings go to war, and David's on the rooftop of his palace, and he sees an incredibly beautiful woman bathing. That's how affairs begin. And he says, what's her name? Affairs don't begin normally at the bedroom door. They begin in the 10 seconds where we could so easily go a different direction. In the 10 seconds, we're at an office too, and someone smiles at us across a room, and we have 10 seconds to decide whether we're going to walk those 20 meters towards her or keep talking to the boring lawyer next to us. 10 seconds. A friend of mine was a church leader with me for many, many years. He had an affair. He lost everything. I've never seen a man lose so much. I said, how did it begin? He said, you won't believe it. She said to me one night after church, can I give you a lift home? He said, the second I stepped in that car, I knew it was all over. Well, 10 seconds. And David has 10 seconds. He could have so easily turned back. He could have even gone off to war with the boys. But no, he used those 10 seconds to say, well, what's her name? I was talking to a young man some time ago, and he told me an event that occurred as he was coming back from a night out with his friends. It was a black tie dinner. And the other boys were going out clubbing, and he thought, no, I'll go home. My wife will still be up. It was about 10:30 at night, and he's driving home, and he's driving down a dual carriageway, and there are lots of traffic lights at certain intervals. And he pulls up. It's about 10:30 at night at this traffic light, and he looks left, and there's a very pretty girl driving a convertible next to him. And he smiles at her, and she smiles at him. And they stop at the next light, and again they smile. And on the third light, he rolls down his electric window and says to her, what's your number? And she shouts a number in, and he pumps the number in. And over the next couple of miles, they talk. And then, as he's getting into his house, putting the key in the door, he gets a text message. Are you married? He texts back, yes. And she texts back, all the best ones are. And that was what it was. It was nothing. It was innocent. One evening he went out and left his mobile phone by mistake in the kitchen. And when he got back 10 minutes later, his wife was holding his phone and she was weeping uncontrollably. He said, Rob, we got over it, but only just. For what? For a text message? He didn't touch her, he didn't sleep with her, he didn't. For 10 seconds, his hand hovered over that electric button, and it could have done so differently, but he chose to use the 10 seconds. That's how an affair begins. And if you're in the middle of an affair, that's how yours began. And it could happen to any one of us, including me, tomorrow. And I don't just say that lightly. I know it's true. How does it develop? Well, like it did for David. It just goes on and on in little increments. When it begins, it's free. If friends say to you, is anything going on between you? You say, no, of course not. Almost silly. You feel stupid for asking. The price is free. It looks innocent. You go into the store and the price tag says free. But as it moves through its stages, the price goes up. It's as if somebody at the back of the store is altering the price on the ticket. Now it needs a little deception. You say, well, I was just practicing with the worship group, but we were busy at work, the car broke down. And one day you walk into that store, and the price tag says, everything. No, I didn't sign up for everything. No. And sometimes it is everything. I've seen men lose wife, sometimes businesses, homes, kids. And how does it end? Well, I can't tell you it always ends badly, because some people find happiness. I understand that. But I'm telling you, in most cases, it ends badly. As it did for King David. It almost cost him the kingdom, for goodness sake. I can remember a man coming into my study years ago. He was about to leave his wife and 2 small children for the woman he was having an affair with in the office. He said, my wife said I should come and see you. My friend said, but I don't have much time. He was quite arrogant, to be honest. I said, well, can you spare me 2 minutes? He said, yeah, I can spare you 2 minutes. I said, take a seat. In my business, I see more affairs in a week than most people see in a lifetime. Let me tell you what the next 2 years hold for you. For the next 2 years, incredible sex. Incredible conversation. Thrills. You'll feel half your age. You'll catch yourself saying, you know what, I doubt we ever loved each other. We were so young when we got married. This is the woman I should have married all along. And that'll last for about 2 years. One psychologist puts it like this. If this is the straight life, clean out the garage on a Saturday, taking the kids to piano lessons, looking for lost hamsters, mending leaking taps. The problem with that life is it's so boring. And we flip off it into this incredibly exciting life. And it is exciting for about 2 years. And then one day suddenly it clicks into another ordinary life again. And taps leak in this love nest. And bank managers' letters dare to invade it. And the ordinary comes in. In fact, in that psychologist's immortal words, the other man's grass may be greener, but it still needs mowing. And I said, one day you'll wake up and you'll wonder what your kids look like first thing in the morning. I know you'll still see them at Christmas and weekends, but you'll wonder what they look like first thing in the morning. And I'm not saying this always happens, but it may happen. You may look back on your wife and say, why was her dress size so much more important than the woman she was? She was always there for me. And I'm certainly not saying that this will happen, but it may happen. You look at the woman lying next to you, and she will not look as attractive then as she does now. And he got up and he walked out. He didn't say goodbye. He hardly said thank you. And I met him a couple of years later at a big Christian conference. He was with his wife and family. They're together now. They're one of the happiest families I know. He never did leave his wife. And he said to me, Rob, you gave me a good kick up the bottom. He didn't say bottom. And I thank you for it. I remember walking into a McDonald's on a Saturday afternoon. It was raining. There's a guy I know in the corner. I said, how you doing, Jack? He said, not good, sit down. He's got 2 small kids with him. He said, you know I left Susan, don't you? I said, yes, I heard that, I'm sorry. He said, and I moved in with Chloe, but Chloe kicked me out a couple of months ago, and Susan won't have me back. He said, I get the kids once a fortnight on a Saturday afternoon. He said, you talk to men about this stuff, don't you? I said, I do. Tell them it's not worth it. The great sex, the conversation, tell them it's not worth it. These are my children. And in a couple of hours, I got to take them back as though they're a couple of library books. Guys, listen, I've told you, I think this could happen to any one of us, including me tomorrow. But you know what? At least once in a life, every man should have somebody talk to them about this stuff. At least once in a life. To paint what might happen when it comes through those gates. Because if we know, we may have a fighting chance of missing it or even getting out of it. I think you're going to love what Herod shares. He's going to share some hair-raising stories with you in the second half. But I think now we'll just take a little break. So thanks a lot.